And I love it. I absolutely love when the players come up to me and say, hey, Coach, can we use this golf? What do you think about this golf versus front? Hey, I got a tilt nose here. What do you think about that? That's when you know you're hitting the mark as a coach, when they're organically asking you for stuff that they haven't, another tool in their toolbox, another call, another three-man combination, like I said, a sort and protection. When they can start doing that stuff and start auto-correcting, that's when it really gets fun.
On today's podcast, we're going to focus on consistency and performance and take a look at some of the things that go into building that consistency to be able to perform at a high level from year to year. And joining me is Matt Jones, who's the run game coordinator at Tennessee Martin. You also know him for his social media handle at Lyman Lunch. Does a tremendous job with that and certainly does well in coaching his players up. So congrats on a great season, Matt, and thanks for joining us again on the podcast.
Yeah, appreciate it, Keith. I'm glad to be back.
So let's talk a little bit about your season. 7-4 on the year, co-champs. You did play a tough out-of-conference FBS schedule, University of Tennessee, right after they beat Alabama, and then Boise State, who's playing for the Mountain West Championship. In addition to that, you had 9 of your linemen in the past 2 years earn all-conference honors. So a lot of good things going on there for you at Tennessee Martin. Yeah,
we Coach Simpson here schedules a very hard and competitive out-of-conference in terms of who we're going to play. And, we tell guys when we recruit them here that they're big-time guys and they deserve the right to play in big-time stadiums. And they go in there with a chip on their shoulder, knowing that those universities may not have recruited them. And we perform, as good as we can. And, that's kind of our MO here in terms of those 9 men that got an opportunity to receive all conference honors. We had 3 first-team offensive linemen and 2 second-team offensive linemen the last 2 years. 3 of those have been returners from the 21 to 22 class. And then both our starting tight ends. One was a second-team all-conference player last year, and then he is with the practice squad with the Steelers now. And then we had a redshirt freshman that really performed in the pass game for us, who ended up becoming first-team all-conference. So those guys, it's a testament to them, their work ethic, their drive, the culture that, the player-led culture that they have in our room that has kind of led to those successes and also led to the team successes. It's easier to vote for all-conference linemen when you're, running the ball well and you get a really good tailback or, you're winning games. Teams tend to notice that more.
Absolutely. It's always better to have some talented players. But, of course, you get to your level, and that's what everybody's doing. They're all out there looking for the most talented guys. And, you get them in your door. It doesn't mean that automatically those guys will be all conference performance. It does take a plan. And you said a player-led culture is a big part of it. So when those guys hold themselves accountable, that's going to go a long way. They have to have a great framework, though, right? They have to be able to increase their football IQ, which I know is something huge with you and permeates your culture. They have to, have a plan. They have to be getting great feedback. So a lot of those things that do go into creating that performance, and that's what we're going to focus on here today. So I guess the thing now, let's take a look at where you're at. You mentioned that today you had your exit meetings with these guys, and now there's 8 weeks they're off on their own. So as you look at this, how does this thing get kicked off now for their 2023 season?
Yeah, so the season unfortunately ended once we didn't, even though we won the conference, we lost to a coin flip with the automatic qualifier for the FCS. So we told those guys the day after, we're celebrating winning our second conference championship or back-to-back championship, that the 2023 season has started. And it started with a major chip on our shoulder that, being snubbed from the playoffs. It is what it is. Can't control any of that stuff. But, if we're going to take the strides that we need to be successful on a national scale, it's got to be player-led and it's got to be an annual calendar. So those guys left today in terms of their player meeting, and they have 8 weeks prior to them coming back on campus. Well, what are you going to do in those 8 weeks that's going to separate you from – there's a lot of teams, really good FCS teams right now that are still playing football, that are still have a helmet and shoulder pads, still being able to get those reps and those drops in the bucket of whether it be steps or hand placement, all that kind of stuff. What are you going to do to keep up with the Joneses, if you will, in terms of those that are still practicing, and then also better your best with your individual performance? Well, with 8 weeks, you have a full cycle, in essence, of a weight room program prior to you getting back on campus. So, the players, and they lead it. We have a group chat. They're going to get the group chat going. Okay, who's lifted today? What indies are you doing today? I will prescribe for them for off-season development. We, videotape our installs. We videotape teach tapes. It could be learning defenses. It could be a technique teach tape, run game emphasis, pass game emphasis. It could be NFL tape. Whatever it is to spark some knowledge in them, those guys will end up, watching those tapes and kind of having an organic conversation on our group chat about learning that stuff. And we have quizzes and ways to, for those guys to do quizzes online so that they can keep up. I told those guys football, it's a use it or lose it deal. Okay, so if you're not constantly talking football all year long and you're giving yourself an 8-week break of talking about line calls, talking about defenses, protection, blitz pickups, all those things, well, 8 weeks can turn into, another 8 weeks and 16. And then you get to spring ball and you're going, man, it feels like forever since we've actually, talked about this play that may come up, 3 or 4 times during the year versus certain defense. Well, if you're not doing that all the time, you lose on that development. You actually don't retain that knowledge as well, especially if you're a guy that hasn't had significant snaps as a starter and played in those games and had to basically pass that test in real time. Those guys have a great advantage of being able to learn those attributes, learn those plays, learn those techniques by the prescription of the plan that we have in our annual calendar. So this next 8 weeks, while they're on their own, is very vital. For one, can we trust them to get the job done? Are they willing to put the work in when there's no one forcing them to do it? But giving them a guideline in which and how to do it allows them to take a little bit of the free thinking out of it. They're not just going to go put some cones down and do some pass sets on their own and kind of, film it and all that. No, here's the indies that we're getting done and they're on our system and you can access it. Well, here's 4 indies today. Here's your workout plan that's given through our strength staff. And then throughout the week, what individual teach tapes can you learn from? So, I don't think that there's a time and a place if you truly want to be successful, especially in offensive line play, with it being a development position. I don't think there's a time and a place to take a extended period off. And now you can let your body heal, and that's all fine, but you need to keep your mind and your learning constantly developing.
In talking to you, you've certainly developed a bit of a formula in how this is done. While you've mentioned a lot of different things here that they're working on, this doesn't have to necessarily encumber a lot of time. In fact, a lot of what you do, is in very small segments, right? Being able to share small clips of this technique or that technique, or to share something with them to bring it to their attention and get that conversation going. And, we do live in a 1 to 2 minute video clip world today. Everything's done in short spurts, but those still can be very useful in building that football IQ. So talk to us a little bit about, your thoughts on the best ways of getting that done, of creating that momentum for your guys and being able to learn and build that off season instead of sitting around and waiting for spring ball, and some of the best things you've found right now to be able to get that done.
Right. That's an awesome question. What I would say is less is more, but more is more. Okay. And what I mean by that is you don't want to have them, okay, you got to go watch a 2-hour install on wide zone. Those guys are going to fast forward it or not even look at it because they look at the end task and say, oh man, it's so time consuming. I don't know if I'm going to pick up every piece. So we take stuff and we segment it, like you said, 5-10 minute deals. If you do 5 to 10 minutes to 20 minutes of just film work a day, and all you got to do is watch it and listen, it almost gets ingrained into you, where you're constantly hearing calls. You're constantly hearing how we would ID this defense. What's some run plays that you'd like to run against that front? Are they gap sound? Are they not gap sound? Where's the tell on this defense? Sometimes it's just question led, and they like to answer those questions. These guys are inquisitive. They're not just going to sit there and be drones and let you program them. They want to kind of learn organically. So when you pose those questions for them and they're not stressed out about it, it's not 4th and 1 on the goal line. They have an opportunity to learn and learn at their pace, but knowing that I have to do what's right for the rest of the room. Like I said before, we have a very good leadership of this room in terms of player accountability. They're going to hold each other accountable. And they're going to laugh when, oh, I remember when I was a freshman and I didn't get this question right or this question correct the way that it should be. So that's one of those things those guys take a lot of pride in. They like it. You know, we kind of have a really good, like, O-line culture, if there is such a thing, of, you know, those guys love watching NFL guys. You know, they love watching the Lyman Lunch stuff. They love watching fellows like Jeff Schwartz or Duke Manyweather and their clips that they put out about O-line training, or whether it be a pancake of the day. You know, there's so much out there that they can learn from, but they enjoy it. They talk about it. Hey, did you see Trent Williams when they were running? I remember they were running the wide zone play and they put Trent in the backfield and he was on the quick sweep running a loaded wide zone. Like, those guys talked about that for a week. So they enjoy it, but you kind of got to build that culture a little bit first, because they don't know what they don't know. You need to show them, here's the end game of your development. Here's where we can get you each semester and each year, but you got to be doing it all the time.
It really is, when you think about it, it's the Socratic method, right? And you're creating player-led learning, which is good because in the off season you can't be there all the time to do it. You're on the road. You're regulated with, you know, what you can do as far as your contact time with them, etc. So being able to, you know, get these guys to answer the questions and ask the questions of each other by just giving them something and setting them up initially with showing them something and maybe asking a question. So it's, you know, it really goes back to, like I said, the Socratic method, where that's what you're trying to do. That it's not all just, you know, the professor standing up in front of the class and lecturing, which is a very passive way of learning. They're engaged in what's happening.
Right. Like, we have a baseline call system, not to get into too much of it, not to give away what we do specifically, but there's weeks where, hey, fellas, we got to change this up. They make the calls. You know, when they have ownership of their learning and what they're saying and how they're doing it, those guys will perform better because they feel like they're fully invested too. It's not, hey, this is let's just say, for instance, a deuce, you know, common O-line call, if you will. Well, fellas, we got to do this, this, and that. You know, you guys make the calls. Now they're fired up. And sometimes they got to teach me what it is, which is great because now it's learning from them. Another thing that we do here that's outstanding is we had an opportunity to get guys to go to O-line masterminds this year down in Frisco, Texas, through Duke Manyweather. It was an outstanding event. All our all-conference players went there, and they got a chance to learn from, you know, NFL Hall of Famers. They got a chance to learn from all these guys that are in the league currently and pick their brain. And the O-line culture is that of there's no ego. Everyone's trying to learn. We know that we can outwork some people, but we also got to outsmart some people, and they get an opportunity to do that. I'm excited for bringing these all-conference players down there this year, but it's just how much O-line stuff can you handle is how much we give you.
That approach really makes it fun. It gives them ownership. It's something, you know, I learned the term educated freedom from Andrew Coverdale, who's been on the podcast. He's the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati St. Xavier. Has won multiple state championships, the places he's been. A great high school coach. But, you know, educated freedom to him means, you know, here's what we've set up so far. I'm going to teach you all this. You need to learn it this way first. But then after that, you know, it goes from little things like, hey, if you need a little bit of a different alignment or split or, you know, whatever it might be to get it done, then you have the ability to do it. You understand why you're doing it because you understand the framework that I've given you. But now you have the ability to take this further. And I think that's some of the best stuff is when your guys can come back to you and say, hey, Coach, you ever think about it this way?
Sure.
And now you're learning too, right? Now everybody's solving a problem and coming up with a better way. And it's a really fun way to coach. I mean, it's a lot different than, you know, command and control. You know, I'm the coach. I tell you how to do it. You do it. If I say jump, you say how high. You know, there's I think a lot more ownership, and then that football IQ develops. And that's going to help you, as we said, the consistency that you create from year to year, it's going to help with that as well.
That's one thing where, you know, I do give them parameters. They don't have free reign, but like, say, for instance, you know, one-on-one pass rush. All right, you're having trouble with this rush move. Okay. Tell me how you're going to defeat it. I'll tell you how I think you should. I'll tell you what I normally prescribe for that to be effective with your knee braces, your hand size, your feet, your, width, length, what you can do. How are you going to get it done? And if you have something that may not be what the exact framework of what I've given you, well, let's go try it in one-on-ones as opposed to trying it on Saturday and in front of, the fans and everyone yelling and screaming. Okay? You show me a couple times in one-on-ones. All right, I'll sign off on it. Let's go. Because I don't think you ever want to put handcuffs on a player. I know O-line is very robotic and they got to learn a lot of stuff. Because of that, I think they trust you that you will give them the right prescription to get the job done. But when they start taking ownership of how their body works and the mechanics of their feet and their foot length and their hand size and how long their arms are and all those things, when they start saying, all right, coach, I love it. It ain't working for me. Okay. Can I try this? If you say no, you've now said the kid has no shot of getting the job done, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's clearly it's not getting done. He's trying to figure a way. You're trying to figure a way. I don't think you ever, as many tools in the toolbox within reason. You don't have to be cute or fancy. This isn't a cute or fancy position by any means. But if there's another way to get it done, even though it might be non-conventional. I remember when we started with this wide zone deal, we started skip pulling on the backside to cut off the, 3 techniques and two eyes and all that. Well, why are you pulling on outside zone? That makes no sense. People look at you like you're crazy. 15 years ago, no one was dead ball snapping, cone snapping, all that stuff. No, that's not how you shotgun snap. Now you see it in the NFL. Okay, so what might be unconventional or lack of knowledge of another technique doesn't negate the fact that technique may work.
Right.
So you got to kind of put your ego in a pocket. That O-line play is usually that way. And you got to say, how the hell are we going to get this job done? And be goal-oriented, but understand the process is going to take you there to get it done.
I agree with you 100%. And you get validation from that in a guest we had during the season, fortunate with Bob Wiley to be able to bring Joe Thomas on and talk to him. And the focus was on, what is good coaching? And one of the things he brought up is exactly what you said, is that his best coaches weren't forcing you to be, a cookie cutter of everybody else. That there was exactly like you said, that bodies work a little bit differently. They're built a little bit differently, a little bit different angles, all that. And his best coaches found a way to let him learn how to adjust some of those things so they worked. I mean, you look at Joe, you look at his stance, a very unique stance, but it worked for him. Right. And that's something that came through pretty clearly, not just with Joe, but with a lot of the guests we had on during the season on the Mushroom Society podcast. But, when you hear a guy who's probably going to be in Canton this July, first ballot Hall of Famer, 10,363 consecutive snaps in the game, saying this is what good coaching is, I think he knows a little bit about it. And it's exactly what you said right there on the approach you take with your guys to make it something that they own. You are, of course, guiding them, directing them, helping them get to that point. But in that process, they're going to learn the best way for them. And I think it's this way too. I think it's a give and take thing. I think as you're doing that and learning how to coach a certain guy, you're going to get a guy like that again, and how to apply things maybe a little bit differently in the future. Right,
and that's one of those things that's I think what we tend to forget is that we're not going to put the helmet and shoulder pads on ever again. These guys can teach you just as much, as you can teach them if you put your ego in your pocket. We have a left tackle in Gavin Olson who started off as a freshman, which I tell every offensive lineman, if you're starting as a freshman, you either are a freak or your team sucks. Okay, and Gavin was a freak. Gavin started as a freshman in 2019 at right tackle. The COVID spring at right tackle, moved to right guard for our first conference championship in 2021, and then moved out to left tackle this year in 2022 and was first team all conference. Okay, I've learned probably more from him than he even realizes, because you're talking about a guy that's played in 3 different positions. A right guard's different than a left tackle, and a left tackle's really different than a right tackle at times, just the way your body has to move. So we would have these conversations, okay, what do we got to do with this stance to get this problem fixed? Well, sometimes when you're fixing one problem, you might open a little bit of another problem, and you're trying to correct them all. But Gavin was able to verbalize, because he's very mature. He's an engineer, super cerebral, quiet, but when it is absolutely to the mark. And, we can have those kind of mature conversations of, all right, here's what we got to do to get it done. And I love when you get opportunities as a coach to learn from one of your players, especially guys that are mature, that really care. Their meter of care is very high, and they want to be successful, and they want to have accolades, but they also want to have an opportunity to play after college. Those guys are, one in a million. So anytime I have players that I can learn from, and they can have a coherent, adult, mature conversation about what we need to get done, man, those are opportunities I think you can't pass up on as a coach.
100%. One thing that I've found myself saying more and more as I talk to different coaches and listen to some of the things they do, it's more about in working with these guys, getting them to feel their technique, right? Getting them to understand, what did that feel like, instead of just telling them what you saw, because ultimately they have to play by how things feel. I mean, they can't go through and say, okay, my foot goes here and this and that. I mean, it's all a feel. They're not going to look down and see how long that step is. They have to feel it. In looking at it from that perspective, what are some of the things you do as a coach individually, you think, to get players to do exactly that, to feel their technique?
Well, one thing that we invested in this year, I know Coach Wiley talks about it all the time, the crawler sled. Of course, we have, the pan sled. We have the crawler sled. It's the best football equipment. You can fight me if you think otherwise. But we have what is called the climb sled. And I believe Coach Callahan, with help of Coach Peters there at the Browns, developed this new Ray crawler sled. And this isn't a plug. I mean, we paid full price for ours. But it is when you're teaching the hip roll, the contact, getting your feet in the ground, staying grounded, driving on the rise, all those things. This vehicle, this apparatus will not move unless you hit it correctly. So it is about as true of in the run game, for you to feel your technique. If you get caught up on one foot, it doesn't move. If you don't keep your core and your hips engaged, it doesn't move. You can't muscle it. It's too heavy. You have to, basically do a power clean into it to get it to move. It's one of those deals where we take our freshmen and we put it on there and we film it, when they first get here. And then after their freshman year, we did it in one of our last meetings with those guys. We showed them where they're at. I mean, there were some guys that couldn't move it 2 feet when they first got here. And now they're taking it for a ride. And now the ride's going faster and they're turning their hips over and they're in a good position, a good neck position to not, make sure they're reducing themselves from injury. They're playing long, all those things that you want in the run game. They're like, oh my God, you guys recruited me off that freshman tape? Holy cow. Just to see whether, but that's one tool. Outside of that, I mean, you just got to do it. You can say iron sharpens iron. We have a really good D-line here. We go against them every day. They're going to feel their technique. They get caught up on one foot. They're going to get buried. But there's not a lot outside of that. Now we'll do some eyes closed hand stuff where, someone's applying pressure to me in pass pro. I'm sitting in the chair. I got my eyes closed and I feel his movement, that kind of thing, to kind of feel in my sit-it. All of a sudden that he puts a bull rush on me. Can I stop the bull, or do I get up on one foot and get walked back? We do some of those where it's more, you're taking away. It's some sensory deprivation, which allows for other sensors to develop, if you will. If you take away the eyes, your hands, your feel of those things sometimes increases. I'm no sports physiologist by any means on that stuff, but those have been helpful.
Yeah. So I think the last component of this is in the consistency is about what you're going to do here too. You, the coach. So of course you're going to set these guys up. You're going to set their learning up. You're going to, ask them good questions to get them thinking, to get the player-led learning going. But you're always developing as well, right? You have to keep developing in this game.
Yeah.
So what's your approach to this particular off season and, coming out of 22, anything that you feel you want to learn more about?
Yeah, so every year, just personally and professionally, I will take one position group on the field, and I'll try to find some leaders in the industry, 4 or 5 guys to Zoom with me to teach me that position. So there may be crossover teaching. I remember I met with a special teams guy, and he said, and everything we do in special teams is ball me man, ball me man, ball me man. Well, what greater kind of little coaching cue for offensive line play? I got a quarterback behind me. It's ball me man. All right. Okay. That might be a easier way of saying things. Sometimes, we'll make sure that there's an economy of language in terms of how I coach. You don't want to be overly detailed, and the guy's going to forget what the hell you even said. So you want to kind of keep your coaching to a minimum, trying to get those buzzwords, this offseason. How can I teach this cleaner? How can I say it easier? Where's the missing link with this guy in terms of how can I make the game slow down for him, get him to where I want him to be, but not have to be reading off a thesaurus to get him there. That's what I do in the off season. So every year I'm going to try to find some, easier, cleaner coaching cues. I'm going to learn another side, another position group that I don't coach. Mostly I focus on defense. If I can learn what D linemen are doing. Now, there's not a lot of D line coaches in the country that want to Zoom with me and teach me, how they go through their processes and stuff. But a lot of DB coaches, man, I love DB coaches because you playing on an island at corner is no different than playing left tackle, moving backwards in a dominant position, eye training, hand training, confidence. You got to be doesn't matter if you're, a big dog or a chihuahua, you got to be confident playing those two positions. Love talking to DB coaches about it. Special teams, like I said, you can learn from that stuff, but always improving. There's always something to be learned, and somebody always says something better. So how can I clean up that teaching? And especially when I do a whole segment in summer called Football School, where all they learn is defenses. And they're not even talking about our plays, because I truly believe as an offensive lineman, you can eliminate half your mistakes just knowing where they can hurt you. So if I'm in this front, I should know what our OC's thinking, what the run game is thinking, what do we like to run versus this look, what do we need surface-wise? Do we need a tight end over here to block this one, or can we do it to an open side? What is that safety telling me? What is that corner's leverage telling me? I can eliminate a lot of stuff with a D end. If I'm a boundary left tackle, I can eliminate about 50% of what that boundary D end can do just by looking at his stance and finding out where the near safety is, or linebacker leverage, if you will. Knowing which way he can go, what games they run out of that stuff, I can eliminate half my issues and be strong where I know that most likely percentages say he's going to attack me. By having that, it's like a cheat sheet to the test. I think we so much as offensive linemen, and just offensive guys in general, we study so much of what we do, and you got to block the guys in front of you. Let's study what they do to true detail and understand how certain coverages affect certain run fits, so we could have what might be a better Mike ID of a front. Right. It might be a call that we make that turns into a 3-man zone, or it turns into a sort and protection because, hey, this is where it looks like they're going to hurt us. Let's get in the right stuff. And I love it. I absolutely love when the players come up to me and say, hey, coach, can we use this call? What do you think about this call versus front? Hey, I got a tilt nose here. What do you think about that? That's when you're hitting the mark as a coach, when they're organically asking you for stuff that they haven't, another tool in their toolbox, another call, another 3-man combination, like I said, a sort and protection. When they can start doing that stuff and start auto-correcting, that's when it really gets fun.
Absolutely.
But they got to have a baseline. They got to have a foundation of knowledge to be able to get them to that. And if they only know your playbook and don't know about the fellas and the types of fronts you're going to see in front of them, they're at a loss, I personally believe.
Well, Matt, again, congratulations on the year. I know there's unfinished business for you and your guys, so it's always a good way to start with that little bit of a chip on your shoulder. But I really appreciate you taking the time and talking about some of these things today that go into creating some consistent performance and really sharing a wide range of ideas here with us. And certainly you're welcome back on the podcast at any time.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Keith. Always a pleasure working with you. It's top-notch programming, and I look forward to the next time we get to talk.